Well, how do you do? I'm Dorothy Roberta Turnbull Stewart. And when my father came home from the Navy in World War I, he met my mother and brought her home to Louisiana. And we lived in New Orleans, where I was born, and then moved over to Mississippi, the Gulf Coast, past Christian, where he, as a real estate broker, subdivided property. And we lived in the subdivision and had a happy life, I guess. But I decided when I graduated that I was going to come back to New Orleans and join the Navy in New Orleans. So that's what I did. So I went ahead, and I wasn't really qualified to be an officer. I was still growing up, I felt. But I wanted to get in and get going. So I volunteered and went up to Hunter College. And so anyhow, they decided the only thing I could do was talk, and they wanted me to do recruiting. So New Orleans, we lived in the St. Charles Hotel. New Orleans didn't have barracks for us, because there weren't that many stationed. And it wasn't like Navy life exactly. The recruiters were great that I worked with, and the officers were just great. They were showing how women in the Navy were still women, and ladies. I mean, that was the whole thing, was to let the society know that our girls were their girls. We never had to sell the Navy openly. I call it that way. To me, when I go to a radio station and talk about what our Navy women were doing and so forth, and talking about some of their lives before they went in service, see, you had to show that their families were behind them, that they were still young ladies, even though they had this uniform on. They weren't going to be different than their sisters were. In December of '45, I finally decided, I have thought back, perhaps I'd like to have stayed for a while longer, but I was ready to get out. So I was assigned to Memphis, Tennessee, to be discharged there. Well, you see, there was no need for me to sell the Navy anymore. I mean, to represent it. I felt like they were big now, they could take care of themselves. I had nurtured them along. No, the Navy did more for me than I ever did for it.